GMC has just dropped the refreshed GMC Yukon for the 2025 model year, and I think this is a great update. I love pretty much everything about this design. So what we're going to do in this video is I'm going to show you the changes that was made here for the 2025 GMC Yukon, both the Denali and we now have an 84 Ultimate as well. Before we jump into Photoshop, have a look at the front side and rear, comparing it to the old one. Also, the interior gets some massive changes as well. Let's have a look at what's going on here with this article from Car and Driver. I'm going to link this down below in the description. As always, 2025 GMC Yukon refresh includes a more desirable diesel engine. So the diesel is still alive in the Yukon. That is great. GMC's full-size SUV also has a restyled interior that gets rid of the push-button shifters. They were a little bit tricky to figure out how to use those things, and adds a huge 16.8-inch touchscreen. All good so far. Yes, I know 16.8-inch touchscreen sounds like a massive screen on the dash, but honestly, I think the integration looks pretty decent in this case. So this is not a completely new Yukon. This is a mid-cycle refresh. The updated diesel 3-liter inline 6, now available on all trims, makes 305 horsepower, which is up from 277, and 495 pound-feet of torque, which is up from 460. So not bad there at all. Will reach dealerships later this year, with pricing expected to be announced closer to the on-sale date. So we have a fresh face here with the lightning elements that take inspiration from the upcoming GMC Sierra EV. As I said, 305 horsepower, 495 pound-feet of torque for the diesel. You do have that being sent either to the rear wheels or all four wheels, and in my opinion, this is a type of vehicle that you definitely want to have in all-wheel drive. You also get the 10-speed automatic transmission. Look at this front face. I think it looks beautiful with the new styling that we have here, but also in the rear. Subtle changes in this is more of a facelift, but you also changed a couple of things in the rear end that I think is great changes. We're going to have a look at that in just a minute here. So last year, the rear-wheel drive powertrain was rated at 23 mpg combined. The all-wheel drive setup peaked at 22 combined. The Yukon standard 335 horsepower 5.3-liter V8, and you also get the 420 horsepower 6.2-liter V8. Still, they carry over unchanged. When it comes to the trim level, the lineup looks a little bit different. The SLE and the SLT trims are replaced by a new entry-level elevation model, and now the off-road oriented 84 gets fancier features with the arrival of, you can now get both. So you can both have the best of off-road capability and luxury in your Yukon here with the 84 Ultimate, which gets height adjustable air suspension and 20-inch wheels with all-terrain tires, and that is a great setup, a great combo. The top spec 84 has full grain leather covering all 3 rows of seat and a bunch of nicer materials overall in the interior. Now the centerpiece for the interior being a vertically oriented 16.8-inch touchscreen, which is absolutely massive. They just keep getting bigger and bigger. I don't know when it's going to stop. Honestly, I think if we think maybe 20 years into the future, I think the entire windscreen here is going to be a big head-up display. Maybe not so good for safety, but at the same time, 20 years from now, I think a lot of cars are going to be completely automated. So I think the entire windshield is just going to become a big screen. However, even though we do have this big screen, they still retain the static climate menu in the bottom with the physical buttons and toggles for the switches there, which is great as well. And the Yukon continues to have a physical volume knob. As I said, they scrapped the previous push button shifter in favor of a new column mounted lever, which goes back to some old school shifters. Now each Yukon trim level has a unique grille design, and that is a trend that is pretty big right now across a lot of manufacturers, to have different grille designs for different trim levels. And I do think that's a cool idea. And the top trim have headlights and taillights that play animations when the SUV is locked and unlocked. Also a huge trend right now. Audi is very big on having some dancing headlights and taillights. Addition of thermal night vision as well, that displays an image in the gauge cluster. Very cool tech in this car. You can still tow up to 8,400 pounds, and it's slated to go on sale later this year. You can expect it, as always, to cost a little bit more than the outgoing model. Now let's jump into Photoshop here and let's have a look at this design from a front, side, and rear. Going to compare it to the old one, which I honestly also think looked pretty good. And there is one detail though in the taillights that is a big deal for me, but it's probably not a big deal for anybody else, and that has to do with the quality of the LED. And I'm going to talk more about that when we get to the taillight section here. So looking at the top here, we do have I do believe this is a 2021 Yukon up here. This is the 84. We do have the C shape here, obviously very static looking design, exactly like we want to have in a big rugged SUV like this, with some beautiful chamfers going all along here. I always felt that this section where the fog light is, this felt like a lonely little island here and needed to be integrated better somehow in the rest of the the key graphics in the front end. But this being the AT4 here, you can see that we still have the skid plate down here. Now look at the changes here. I think it just, overall, the quality of the design just got a lot better. A huge improvement when it comes to all the integrations and also the some of the chamfers here. For example, look at this. We have a nice starting point up here, and this is where, underneath here is where all the graphics of the front end happens. I like, as I've said so many times before, when we have a clear starting point for the top graphics, and then we have these thick LEDs now, still in the same C shape that we had in the 2021. You can see that it got a lot more dynamic with these lights. Here, this line doesn't have any connection with the grille here. It just clashes right into this line here. But now if we continue this line, you can see how it goes in and has a clear connection with this chamfer going down here into the lower corner of the grille here. I think it's a beautiful integration. You also have, it looks to be these to be the main headlights right here, framed by the key graphic daytime run light around it. And then, I'm not sure if this is the sort of integration I was looking for the fog lights down there, but it definitely looks a lot better than the 2021 model year, which didn't even have, a base for it to rest on here. It just sits in a plain surface and doesn't have any connection to anything else. At least here in the 2025 model, we do have a separated bumper here in black. You can see how the fog lights now sit inside of that bumper. I think it looks absolutely stunning, and still have the skid plates down here. You can barely see it, but we do have a skid plate down here. Of course, being an off-road oriented trim level, we need to have the red tow hooks in here, and you can clearly see that they are intact here as well, with the AT4 logo. Special trim for the AT4 here as well, and this is the one we're going to focus on in this video, even though they are dropping the new Denali as well. So looking at the side view here, before having a look at those LEDs that I want to talk about in the taillights. So the top one is the 2021, the lower section is the 2025, and this being a more of a it is a mid-cycle refresh and not a massive change for the side view. That's very rare that companies are changing up the side views a lot, or even the rear end. Mostly the front face, given the new face and some new tech on the interior. So we don't really have a lot of changes here, and that is totally fine with me, because I do think the old one still looks very modern with these beautiful lines here, very static again. And we have a clear connection with this line here going into the bumper right here in this line. Same goes with this lower section in the side view. Also have a clear connection to the bumper in the rear there, with the one single beautiful shoulder line that cuts right through here, looking cool. I also like this shark fin design, because we have a line going from here and then creates a subtle little cutout in the base for this shark fin design in the rear end, looking very clean. And these has to be probably the 20-inch wheels with the all-terrain tires. Also looking, even though they're 20-inch, they don't look too big for this type of vehicle. It still looks very, very good. Now, the rear end here, before we jump in and have a look at the massive changes also in the interior. So I want to talk to you about the quality of LEDs and how you can, how it's, having big, thick LEDs in the rear, and it just brings up the level of quality for the overall design. And that is exactly what happened here. Because you can see at the 2021 model here, you have a full LED. It looks to be a full LED here, but you can see how the strength of the LED is completely different across the entire length of this LED. It's very bright here, then almost nothing here, and then it becomes a little brighter in this area, and it just doesn't feel like it has that quality feel that I want to see in modern LEDs, and that is exactly what they switched up here, because this is a much higher level of LED that we have in the 2025 model. You can see that the strength of it is evenly spread out across the entire length of the LED, and that's exactly what I want to see. That is one change that we have. I do think the housing for the rear taillight itself is exactly the same as we had in 2021. They also ditched this little graphic feature here. The black piece, it's now gone, and I think that cleans up the rear end very nicely. The rest of the trunk looks to be almost exactly the same here. But one detail here that I'm really glad to see is starting to make a comeback in not just GMCs, but overall in the automotive industry. We had this era where companies are, hiding the exhaust pipes for some reason. I don't understand why. Maybe because it looks a little cleaner, but at the same time, when we have a big V8 up front, I do want to have the exhaust pipe visible, and they are making a comeback here for 2025, as you can see, with the quad tailpipes in the bottom, looking absolutely beautiful, and I think it looks so much more sporty than the 2021 model year. Not just the tailpipes here, but also this area being cleaned up. And overall, it's just a huge, huge improvement. Even though they're very tiny changes specifically in the rear, but I think these changes definitely makes it feel like it is a 2025 model year. Now, last but not least, this interior here. And this is probably the area that I think really needed an upgrade to be competitive in 2025, because you can see that the gauge cluster, even though I personally appreciate having analog clusters like this and a relatively small screen right here in the middle, it's still not competitive when you look at the competition that has big screens across everything these days. But thankfully, you can see here we have these weird button shifters that I don't understand why GMC and Chevy, maybe not Chevy, maybe only GMC put into the vehicles. That is now gone, and instead of this infotainment screen, we also now have this 16.8-inch infotainment screen here, which is absolutely massive. But I don't care about that, because I think the integration, this is a big vehicle, so it feels relatively well integrated in this case. And on top of that, we still have the physical buttons down here intact, and that is all I personally care about, to still have those intact. You can see that the graphics for what you're adjusting with these toggles are all digital, but that's totally fine. And we now have a new gauge cluster, completely new gauge cluster here, still with a beautiful housing around it though, and a framing around it. It looks very clean, but it's all completely digital now as well. Totally fine for me, as long as we have details like this, buttons down here and a housing for the gauge cluster, then I'm totally happy with the changes that were made here. As you can see, the button shifters that used to be where this vent is now, has now been located right here to the column shifter. Old school style that still works, so why switch that up? So overall, I think GMC has done a great job with this refresh. I think it's exactly what was needed for a mid-cycle refresh to keep it competitive and also make it more beautiful, and in addition to that, makes it look even more luxurious than before.